Hello, everyone. My name is Mikey, and welcome to my house. This is episode 2 of my new podcast, Mikey's House, and I'm so happy that you guys could come over and hang out for a bit. I can't believe it's already episode 2, even though it's only 2 episodes in. I feel like this is going to go by really fast. I feel like it's like, I don't know, I'm going to blink and then we're going to be at episode 50 and then all of a sudden episode 100. I don't know. I think it's going to go by really fast, but I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. I have tried to film this episode like 5 times already, but the birds are going absolutely crazy outside. I live in an apartment complex where I'm like facing like a grass courtyard area, and there's lots of birds around. I have a family of birds on my that have kind of taken over my patio. I haven't really been able to enjoy it because they built a nest and decided to have a family, and I don't want to disturb them. But there was a cat in the middle of this courtyard, and I think they were trying to get it to get out of the courtyard. So they were going absolutely insane. So I had to like stop and record this like 5 times. So fifth time's a charm. I'm so happy to be with you here with you guys today. I am going to be telling you guys about my life, my story, how we got here. So it might be kind of a long episode, but I think it's important before I go any further to kind of share my full story. If you guys are familiar with me, you might know me from like TikTok or social media like Instagram, Facebook, whatever you guys watch my videos on. You guys might have already done a deep dive on me, so you might kind of have a picture of what's been going on, what my life has been like, and what my journey has been like. But I really want to go in depth and share everything with you guys from the day I was born up to now. I just feel like before we go any further, it's important that I share that with you guys, just so you guys are familiar with me, why I'm doing what I'm doing. The last episode, the first episode, was really fun. We did like a Q&A kind of icebreaker, 21 questions kind of thing, where we got to get to know each other a little bit better. I reached out on social media and you guys gave me a bunch of questions to answer on the podcast for that first episode. And it was so much fun. There were some deep questions. There were some funny questions. I got a lot of responses about things like UFOs and Bigfoot and besties. I would love nothing more than to talk about Bigfoot and UFOs with you guys. So I don't know. It is summer. Summerween is apparently a thing now. So maybe we'll do like a Summerween episode, and then definitely in October we'll get into the spooky stuff. But for now, I just want to kind of cover the bases and let you guys know a little bit about who I am, who you're watching, who you're spending time with. I don't want this to feel like you're just in some stranger's house and I'm just talking your ear off. So I feel like this is kind of, I want to reiterate, I want this podcast to be literally just where I can come vent or we just talk about whatever. But, I do have a mission that is to raise awareness and advocate for people living with rare diseases, my conditions like epilepsy or, neurodegenerative diseases like ALS. So, that's always going to be a core value of mine. I have since dedicated my life to, helping strangers on the internet feel not so alone. And I think through sharing my story, there's that, level of like solidarity that we can all share with each other and lift each other up. So I think that, by sharing my story, I feel like it might inspire people to share their story, or just if people don't want to share their story, they're just going through it and my story resonates with you, or that you'll be able to take a piece of this and not feel so alone. And that's just my mission. I've been in some really dark places, and I think community and connection really got me through that. When I first made my very first video on TikTok, I had no idea what it was going to turn into. I was really just reaching out for help online. I don't know who my target audience was. I literally just set up my camera, started talking, and then I got so many responses, and it was beautiful. And all of a sudden I didn't feel alone. For a long time I was feeling so alone, and all of a sudden that was like starting to fade away. And the more I did this, the less alone I felt, the more I connected with you guys, the less alone I felt. So that's kind of my mission. If anybody's feeling alone, just know you're not alone. There are 8 billion people in this world, and I guarantee you that there is someone out there that knows exactly how you feel, exactly what you're going through. And even if you don't feel like that, I just encourage you to stay positive, stay hopeful. I think in the next episode, we're going to talk about finding hope in unexpected places. I think that would be a really cool episode to do. So, yeah, just remember you're not alone, and I'm here for you. We're all here. There's a whole community ready to back you up. So, yeah, just wanted to say that before we get into today's video, because I know these first couple of videos on this podcast are probably going to be a little bit more on the deeper side, just because I want to cover the bases and get my story out there. And hey, if you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. It really helps so much. And I just launched a Patreon, which I'm so excited about. And if you don't know what Patreon is, it is a place where you can get extra perks like members only viewings. So, like on there, you'll be able to listen or watch the episodes of this podcast like 5 days earlier before it comes out. So that's really cool. Also on there, we'll be doing like bonus lives, Q&As. You guys will get, first dibs on what we talk about in the podcast, which I think is really cool. There's all types of, other stuff on there. If I have any extra footage or bloopers, merch, you guys will be the first to know about it. So if you want to support this podcast, I would really appreciate you guys joining. There's different levels of memberships that you guys can choose from, all with different perks and stuff like that, different features. But if you want to support this podcast, I'd really appreciate it. I'm hoping to be able to get better equipment. I'm hoping to build a set for you guys just to, I don't know, make this more official. I really think that this podcast can go far, and I want to see how far it can go. So if you guys want to contribute, I would really appreciate it. Also, if you don't want to join the Patreon, that is okay. If you'd rather just donate, I will have links to how you can support this podcast just by donation in the description below. But I do hope you join us over there, and I can't wait to see you. All right. So the origin of my story, it's a really long bestie. And before I get into this, I really want y'all to know, like, it's crazy. I sometimes look back at my life and I really can't believe that this is my life. And, everybody's story is different. Lots of people face adversity and hardships. But even though this is my life, sometimes I just really can't believe it. I'm 26 years old. I was born on June 5th, 1999. I was the last of the 90s babies, but I don't even know if you could consider me a 90s babies because I was only alive in the 90s for 6 months. But I was born in 99 in a hospital in West Texas in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert. I guess everything at first was kind of fine, but I think in the first like month or two after I was born, I started having seizures. My biological mother told me that I would just start shaking and just like kind of stare off, and she couldn't get me to snap out of it. She said the first time it happened, she was so freaked out that she rushed me to the hospital, and they told her that I was having a seizure. They thought that maybe I had had a fever that had gotten too high or something like that. But I didn't have a fever, and they just weren't stopping. They would just kind of come and go. And so I was placed on anti-seizure medication around that time. And I think eventually, I'm not too sure the timeline of like when they kind of stopped, but after they did stop, I'm going to say maybe about 6 months. After they did stop, I was taken off the seizure meds, and they just kind of told my mom that I would just kind of grow out of it. So that's what we thought happened. I really didn't have any other problems until I was about 6 years old. And this is a really weird memory for me because it just feels like a fever dream, but like this really happened. I was at one of those like petting zoos, and they had one of those like actual carousels with the actual live horses, not the like carnival rides, but with like the actual horses where you could get on a horse and it just, takes you around the pen or whatever. And so I was like, I want to do that. And I think I was on a trip with my grandfather at the time and his wife. And so they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. I grew up in West Texas. I loved horses, and I I just thought it'd be fun. They put me on the horse and we're going around, and I was very present at first. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I think the horse's name I was on was like Geronimo or something like that. And I remember thinking how cool that was and how cool this horse was. And I was looking around, I was waving at my grandparents. And then all of a sudden, it was just like I was not on the horse anymore. It was really like I wasn't anywhere. It was literally just like I stopped existing in that moment. And I don't know like where I went. And then all of a sudden, the horse is like neighing and bucking, and I like snap out of it, and all of a sudden I'm back on the horse, and then the horse like calms down. It was really weird. It was very startling, but that was freaky enough for me to remember that, and I'm glad that I did because it made sense later, but never told anyone about it then. I just kind of was like, oh, that was weird. And I was sick. So, my level of consciousness was, so yeah, after that, nothing really crazy happened. When I was 10 years old, though, very random, I was running in a track meet and I hit my leg on something. I don't think it was a hurdle. I think it might have been the side of the bleachers, actually. I was getting off the track and I hit my right, like kind of above my knee, and it felt I like felt it because I was like, oh, that hurt. But then I pushed deeper and I felt something hard inside my leg. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. Maybe I just hit it hard enough that like it just bruised and it didn't go away. And actually, over like the next month, it was getting bigger. So I finally told my parents. And they're like, oh, they felt it and they're like, oh, yeah, that is weird. So they take me to our small town, rural, whatever that word, small town hospital. And they do an x-ray and they're like, hey, so crazy, but you have a bone tumor. And of course, I didn't really understand the weight of that, but my parents were like, what? So they're like, yeah, you have a bone tumor. They're mostly benign, and it is called an osteochondroma. Again, I'm like 10. I'm like in fifth grade. And um, I was looking at they took me back to the x-ray room. Again, it was a small town hospital, so they did not mind bringing me back literally into the x-ray room to like look at the pictures on the old school, like where they would take the films and put them on that wall with light and you could see them like that. Now everything is like computerized, but like digital. But I remember them taking me back and doing that and showing us. They're like, yeah, here it is. And we were like, whoa, that's crazy. So super random. I ended up having to go see a specialist at a children's hospital in Dallas and loved that hospital. Such a great hospital. I have very fond memories of that hospital. I was in that children's hospital quite a lot and it was just a really cool hospital. But yeah, so I had to go there and I had to have surgery to remove it. They, took it out and yeah, it was benign. So they just stitched me right on up and home I went. And I just hoped that I didn't have another one and I didn't. But just a random thing there. That was my first actual surgery. Yeah, so fast forward a little bit later, 2 years, I'm in athletics, but I didn't really do athletics. So I was in what they called off season because I just was not athletic. I did not want to have any part in sports. I hated it. But they made us do this like physical thing but I think it was literally just a scoliosis check. I don't think it was really like a full physical. It was just a scoliosis check, which I feel like is so random. But they all put us kids in a room and one by one, we lined up and went up to these nurses and these nurses like had like a measuring tape and like measured our spines. We took our shirts off and they measured our spines and felt it. And when they felt mine, they were like, huh, you should probably go get an x-ray. So they wrote out a note to give to my parents and whatever. We ended up going and getting an x-ray and then we found out that I have kyphoscoliosis, which is a spinal disease. So, scoliosis is when you have the curvature of the spine, it can affect your posture. But there's also another condition called kyphosis, which is when you kind of have like a hunchback. So like instead of your spine curving sideways, the top of your spine kind of curves out. So kyphoscoliosis is when you have both of those. So your spine curves to the side and it also curves out. Very uncomfortable. I always just thought I just had bad posture. But yeah, so I had to go back to that children's hospital in Dallas, do some x-rays, and they just monitored it for a while. That we talked about putting in surgery, like getting the rods, but it just was not that severe, that crazy. So I still have it. It's not that crazy to even, but just, another thing, it just kind of felt like I've always been in and out of hospitals for these like weird reasons. And, I don't know, it's just really weird. I feel like I kind of grew up in hospitals and doctor's offices. But that same year, I started experiencing what I thought were migraines. My biological mother had migraines. And so I just kind of thought like, I'm getting migraines and I would get them with like, so first my vision would just get really kind of like fuzzy. And then I would start seeing like flashing lights. And so didn't think anything about it, but after that was over, the visual side of it was over, I would get a really bad headache. And they usually just lasted for a day, but the longest that they have lasted was like a week. But I'll get into that in a second because basically they just progressed. So when I was 16, a couple years later, I just started feeling really unwell, very tired, very fatigued. A couple years before that, my biological father had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So my lymph nodes started swelling up. I was having all this weird stuff going on, and just to add to the list of weird stuff that my body has done, with my father just being diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma and cancer runs very heavy on his side of the family. They sent me to an oncologist, and they're like, well, I think we should definitely take out one of these larger lymph nodes. And I'm like, okay, so like surgery. And he's like, yeah, surgery. So I meet with a surgeon, and the first lymph node they tried to go after was one under my right arm, like in my armpit. And so Christmas Eve of, I think, 2015, I have an attempted surgery. They go in, but then all of a sudden they can't find the lymph node. I don't know what happened. It was really weird. I don't really understand that. And I probably should have pushed for more questions or more answers. But yeah, so I had surgery for like no reason. They just ended up closing me up, and I was really sad about it because I was just like, it was Christmas Eve and I had to have surgery, and I don't know, I was being a dramatic mess. But a year later, we went to see another surgeon at a children's hospital in Lubbock, Texas. And this surgeon was like, something is definitely going on. We need to see what's up. So I want to do another biopsy, but this time let's go for one in your neck. So they sent me up for surgery, had another surgery, had the biopsy, and they took out a lymph node from the right side of my neck, kind of under my jaw. And she was like, y'all aren't crazy. There is something going on. The lymph node is not normal, but we'll see, what the results say. And the biopsy really didn't come back with anything. So I just was like, no big deal. Glad we got that checked out. So at this point, I'm no stranger to surgeries. I'm no stranger to hospital stuff, doctor stuff, medical, whatever. It just became kind of like normal to me. Also that year, my appendix, I had appendicitis, so I had to get my appendix removed, and it was just a lot of surgeries at once. It was really weird. I was missing a lot of school. I don't know. People kind of started calling me like the sick kid, and that was kind of weird because I don't know. I just was like, I can't help it, and people were just kind of weird about that. But yeah, so fast forward a year later, I turned 17. Almost out of the house. It's my senior year of high school, and these migraines that I just mentioned to you guys are getting more insane, so much more intense, like just more pain and lasting so much longer. I think the longest one has lasted was like 2 weeks, where it was literally just I'm eating Tylenol and Advil like candy, and nothing is helping. So finally, so I had one, and it just felt like boom, all of a sudden I felt like I had been hit by a truck. Like I could not think, I could not like talk. It was just so bad. And I was talking to my mom about it, and she was like, oh, it's just a headache. Like, and she didn't want to take me to the hospital because I think I had been to the ER a few times in those couple of months before for just headaches, and them, having to do like a CT scan of my brain and then not finding anything. But this was just so serious, and I couldn't handle it. So I got in the car and I drove myself to the next city over to the big hospital. And yeah, they checked me in there, and it was a really bad experience, honestly. They like wanted to do a spinal tap, and I just couldn't make it through because the doctor did not like numb me. It was really weird, and he was very rude, and he was like, well, if you don't let me do it, I'm just gonna have to admit you. So I was like, send me upstairs. And so he sent me upstairs, and again, didn't really find anything, but I was in the hospital for like 3 days. They were just trying to figure out what was going on. Nothing really happened. And at this point, I'm getting really burned out and frustrated because I'm just like uncomfortable. I've had all these medical problems, and nobody's ever figured out anything. So I was like, why am I going to all these doctors? I'm like, I know something is going on. Don't know what it is, probably a lot of things, but why am I going to all these doctors if nobody can figure out anything? So I decided when I turned 18, I was like, I'm done with doctors. I want to go to school. I want to live my life and just kind of forget about this, put this in the past. And that's what I did. I dropped out of high school, which that's a whole story. I'll have to tell you guys exactly what the breaking point on that was. But yeah, I dropped out of high school, and I ended up moving to Austin and going to school for audio engineering. Best years of my life. So glad I did it. I think everything happens for a reason. I don't believe in coincidences or whatever. I think the universe is very intentional with things. So yeah, I had a great time, and some of the best years of my life. I didn't really have too many problems. The headaches and the migraines continued, but I would just go to the ER, and they would give me like pain meds, and then it would kind of get better from there. So I just was like, okay, now anytime I have like a headache, I just have to go to the ER, tell them this happens and it's a migraine, and the only way to stop it is like, getting like extra strength Tylenol or whatever through an IV. And that was just like a routine for me. So I was just doing that, going to school, and I graduated. I started working in the music industry. I had a band, we were playing shows, and it was a great time. But I just had kind of lived with this in the background, like my new friends that I had made from school and just life, and those, my early adulthood years. I really had no idea the extent of what I had been through. I told a couple of friends, but I still really hadn't shared the extent of my life and everything that I had gone through. So yeah, I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to live my life and not have to revolve around medical stuff in hospitals. So from about 18 to 22, nothing really happened. I actually made the decision to move to Colorado when I was 22. I was in a really toxic relationship. And after that ended, I just didn't really want to be in the area anymore. My younger brother was moving to Colorado, uh, and my biological father was in Colorado. I ended up helping my brother move there. And that was my first time ever going to Colorado. When I went to visit, I just was so like in love with Colorado. It was so beautiful. We went like late winter, so like January, February of 2021, and it was just so beautiful. I fell in love immediately, and I was like, I have to be here. So I came home and I started packing, and I ended up moving to Colorado, and it was amazing. I got a serving job there, with a beautiful view of the mountains, and it just kind of felt like I was living in this daydream for like a while. It was just kind of surreal. I was thoroughly enjoying life at that time. So I was working at this restaurant for about 5 months when I started noticing some strange problems, maybe 4 months. So it's kind of complicated because these things kind of overlap what I'm about to say. So going back to the whole migraines situation, they were definitely getting worse and they kind of started presenting a little differently. um, Honestly, for a while there, I kind of thought that I was having like strokes or mini strokes, but it was that same feeling I would get, but just worse. So I remember a really bad one. I was walking up the stairs carrying laundry, and then all of a sudden I started to smell burning wires, like an electrical fire. If you guys have ever smelled an electrical fire or burning wires or even burning plastic, it all kind of smells the same, but it's a very distinct smell. And I remember smelling that, and I called my dad and I called my brother, and I was like, hey, do you guys smell that? And I'm like smelling the walls. I probably seemed crazy. And they're like, I don't smell anything. But it was so real to me. And then I was like, okay, whatever. So no big deal. I get my hamper full of clothes and I go into my room, and then I'm trying to fold my clothes. And then all of a sudden, I just get this really weird feeling. And it's like deja vu, but like mixed with panic. I don't even know how to describe it. It is such an indescribable feeling. And then I got the flashing in my eyes. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to have another migraine. So I kind of sit down, take a break from folding clothes, but it just gets worse. And all of a sudden I can't really see anything. I had the TV on, and then now the people speaking on TV just kind of sounds like blah, 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 like gibberish. And I get really scared. And I'm thinking like about to call it to my dad, but I can't really talk, but still fully conscious, just my vision is really blurry and flashy. It's like, I don't know, it's like being right in front of a strobe light, honestly. And maybe I laid there for like 15 minutes, and it kind of just slowly goes away. And then right on cue, here comes the major, major headache. And then this new part, which freaked me out, I think the most, was the whole left side of my body kind of started tingling and then went completely numb. Like I could not move it, or like I could not walk. I could not like move my arm, and it felt like this left side of my body did not belong to me. Like I looked down at my left arm and it felt like it wasn't my arm. It was so weird, very strange. After about an hour or two, that went away, and I kind of just got my bearings and was like, okay, that was weird. I don't want to go to the hospital though. So I just, kept on pushing and took some Tylenol for the headache. And a day later, the headache went away. I didn't think anything about it. A week later, same thing happened again, but this time I was at work and I was taking orders, and people were telling me their orders and I could not understand their orders. And it was at that moment where I was like, I think I'm having a stroke. And I thought about going to tell my manager, but I didn't. I just ended up going into the walk-in, getting some cool air. I was able to mouth like get the words out like to my coworker, like, hey, I have to go take a break real quick. I'm so sorry. And I felt bad because we were in the middle of the rush, but I just didn't know what was going on. And I sat in there for a little bit and let it kind of do its thing, and came out. My manager was like, where were you? And I was like, I just wasn't feeling well. I'm sorry. Just trying to make an excuse or sense of what that was. And so that kept happening and the symptoms were getting worse over the next like 2, 3 months. Kind of around the same time, I started noticing some stiffness in my left foot, and I just like my left foot just felt weird. I don't know. I kind of just started like not being able to really like pick my foot up as well, move it how I want to. And so like I kind of started tripping over rugs, just became a little bit more clumsy at work. And so I think it was around then where I was like, okay, something is definitely going on. I definitely knew it in my mind like from months before, but I just was so in denial and did not want to go back to the hospital because of when I was 18, and just my whole life going through all the medical stuff. And I just didn't want to go through that again, and didn't want to open that jar. So whatever. I did end up just like, hey, maybe I'll just go see a, primary care doctor and see what they say. It could be nothing. In my head, honestly, I'm thinking that I'm burnt out. I am working a lot. I'm in a new place. I'm stressed. I didn't really know anybody but my coworkers, and they were cool, and I still am in touch with some of them today, and I think they're awesome people, and I wish we could have worked together for longer. But yeah, it just was a lot. I was 22, starting brand new. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. 22 and starting brand new, and I just thought I was burnt out. I was working like two 12-hour doubles a week, nothing crazy. Lots of clopins. I'd close and then, late at night, get off at like 11, have to come back open at like 8, so like nothing like, it made sense. I thought I was just overdoing it. So whatever, I go to see this primary care doctor, and she's like, okay, yeah, I think you're just burnt out. And I'm like, all right, yeah, no big deal. Cool. What should I do? And she's like, well, maybe just, take less hours. Cause I was at 40 hours max. I was maxed out on my hours. And I was like, okay, yeah, I didn't really want to do that because I needed the money, and the money was good. And so I didn't do that. But eventually it started getting to the point where at work, when it was busy, my manager would come out and say like, hey, who wants to go home first? Who wants first cut? And it's, at first I'd be like, no, please, like, let me see, I'll do anything. Like, I'll even go to the kitchen. And I hated working in the kitchen. But, after a while I was like, okay, I'll go home. I want to go home. And it just wasn't feeling super good. I started losing a lot of weight really fast. And that stiffness in my leg or my foot, uh, kind of was spreading to my lower left leg, and I was kind of noticing that, but again, didn't really think much about it. I ended up going on a trip that year, early September, to LA. I flew out to LA to see some friends for the weekend. Had a great time. But it was really there where I had a friend. He was like, Mikey, I don't mean this in a bad way, but you're like really skinny. You look like you're going through something. Are you okay? And I was like, oh yeah. And in my head, I knew I was tired. I knew I was stressed, but honestly, like I was feeling the glow up. I was like, I got money, I'm working, I got a job, and I'm skinny. So like I look great. I really thought I was having my glow up. I thought this was my glow up era. I was like, I'm in LA with my friends. Like we are living it up. That was not the case. Little did I know that my body was trying to give me tons of red flags that I just loved ignoring, I guess. But so flew back home from that trip, ended up having to quit that job because I just was not doing well. I was kind of not doing good at work. I was really clumsy. I started just to like trip a lot at work. I wasn't doing a good job, and I was getting really concerned at this point. So I figured I had enough saved up, so I just needed to take a couple months off. Maybe I would ask for my job back when I felt better, or just find another job, whatever. So during this time I'm resting, let's fast forward to early February of 2023, after that New Year's. My beautiful friend Rachel, she flies me out to Austin, um, for my friend's birthday. And we have a blast that first night. I land, and they pick me up from the airport. We just hit the ground running. We were having a good time. It was kind of my friend's birthday weekend. We were celebrating him the whole weekend, and it was a great time. It was great to see people. I'd been in Colorado for a while, hadn't really seen anybody in like 6, 7 months, and maybe 8 months. I don't know. It had been some time. And so it was really good to see everybody. It was kind of like a reunion. First night was fine. Second night, we were in the club and I was drinking, and I just was not feeling good, thinking I drank too much. I kind of stopped drinking when I went to Colorado because the altitude, I don't know if you guys have ever drank at altitude, but like one drink at like sea level is like three drinks. I don't know what the actual is, like two, three drinks in the mountains. It was crazy. Like I had a beer one time in Cripple Creek. I could not even drive back down to the mountain, like down the mountain. I had to like sit for a couple hours. So didn't really drink there. I think I was kind of in my stoner era, but yeah, I couldn't drink there. So wasn't really drinking here because I just kind of, wasn't doing that. Didn't want to do that. But, I kind of thought that it's been a while since I've gone this hard. So maybe I'm just not feeling great. Well, I get kind of worse. Well, I say kind of a lot worse. And I start feeling kind of fevery, really sickish. And then I start kind of feeling like kind of out of it, like not confused, but just everything just feeling a little like reality is not reality. I don't know how to describe it. I was just really out of it. I started getting really bad upper abdominal pain. And the day that I was supposed to go back to the airport to fly back to Colorado, my friend Rachel, who flew me out, she was taking me and the whole time I'm telling her like, hey, I don't feel good, but I really wanted to get on this plane to go back home so I could just get in bed, lay down and rest. And we were in the parking lot. I'm about to get out and she looks at me and she was like, Mikey, you do not look good. And I was like, you know what? I really don't feel good. And I think something is really, really wrong. And she was like, I'd hate for you to miss your flight, but I think we might need to go to the emergency room. And I was like, I don't want to miss this flight either, especially because she got it for me. And I felt bad. So I was like, I don't want to go to the emergency room. I need to get on this flight. And she was like, but how do you feel? And I was like, I feel like I need to go to the emergency room. And she was like, okay, like screw the flight. We're going to the emergency room. And so she took me. I get there. I'm telling them I'm dizzy. I was saying my stomach, but it wasn't my stomach. It was kind of just like in the middle of my abdomen, just like there was a ball there, like a really tight ball. And I'm telling the doctors this, and he was like, well, you were on a plane, so it might be COVID. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. Definitely could be. I was also at the bars, at the clubs, living life. So maybe I got COVID, right? So they gave me some dizzy medication to help with the dizziness and kind of sent me home. And so after that, I called my mom and to see if she could come get me the next day and just bring me back to our hometown, which was like just 3 hours from Austin. So not a far drive. And that's what she did. And I told her what was going on. And so the next day she picks me up, we go back home and doing a lot worse. I'm really gray, really pale, feeling nauseous at this point. And I told my mom that if I wasn't better by the next day that we were going to the hospital. She said, okay. And next morning I wake up. This is the worst I had ever felt in my life. The most pain I've ever been in. It was crazy. I could not even open my eyes. I could not even see straight. And so I go into my mom's room and I just tell her we got to go now. So we go to the emergency room. Well, first we go to this urgent care across the street from the hospital emergency room. I go in and I walk up to the counter to the triage lady, and I don't know what made me say this, guys. Trust your gut, trust your instincts. I don't know. Go with the flow, because I don't know what made me say this, but I go up to this nurse and she's like, hi, how can I help you? And I just said, hey, I need to see a doctor. I think I have a blocked intestine. And she was like, oh, well, what makes you say that? And I told her, I was like, I don't know. And I told her what I was feeling. And she was like, okay, well, if you do, I recommend just going to the emergency room across the street at the hospital, because we don't have a CAT scan here. We don't have, all that stuff. And if the doctor would probably send you over there anyway. So I was like, whatever, fine. My nightmare of going back to the hospital is happening. And so we go back to across the street, Apple across the street to the emergency room. I go in, I just tell them the same thing. I'd say, hey, I think that I have a blocked intestine. And they're like, okay, let's go back. So they get me back. They were really nice, but as soon as I get in the room, this like cocky doctor who was honestly just a douchebag, just a douchey ER doctor comes in and is like, hey, so what's going on? And I told him, and he was just like, I told him that I was at the urgent care across the street. And he's like, well, why did they send you over here? And I told him what she told me. And he was like, okay, well, I don't know why they sent you over here, but I guess we can do some tests. Here, drink this. And he gave me three giant things of contrast to drink. And he's like, well, do a CAT scan, see, but if anything, I think that you probably just have like the flu, COVID, or like a stomach bug. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And at this point, it was weird because I couldn't pee and I could not poop. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't. It was so weird. I couldn't even, like the muscles were like not working. It was so weird. And so I go to the CAT scan, come back 5 minutes later, not even maybe, that doctor comes running into the room. And this time his whole attitude has changed. He was like, okay, so we found out what's wrong. You have something called an intussusception. And I look at my mom and we look back at him and we're like, what is that? He was like, it is very, very, very rare in adults. It usually only happens to babies. But when it happens in adults is very life-threatening because it's usually caused by something secondary like a tumor or a mass or something like that. And it is a medical emergency. He explained, well, what an intussusception is it is when a part of your intestine, so let's say you got your intestine, and part of it just kind of folds into itself like telescope, kind of. You like those old long pirate telescopes? It's kind of like, when you close it, if that makes sense. So, or like when you're folding a pair of socks doing laundry, when you fold a pair, and you push it inside of itself, that's literally what happened. So, yeah, anyway, ambulance came to take me to a bigger hospital, was there for a week, and I'll do a whole episode on the intussusception thing just so we can kind of get through this episode. I'm sorry if this feels like it's dragging, but I know it's all crazy. Still can't believe that this all happened to me, but yeah, so I go to the hospital. I'm in there for a week. Yeah, I'll have to do a whole episode on this because it's really just crazy. Or you guys can go watch I do have story times on TikTok about this. I go more in depth than this, but just for time's sake today, we'll just kind of keep it short and sweet. Was in the hospital for a week. They were going to have to do surgery to remove that part of intestine that had folded because if it's folded for too long, the blood supply will be cut off. It'll die. You'll become septic, and then you could die. But the surgery had like an 80% mortality rate because of where my specific intussusception was at. It was in my duodenum, which is the section of your I think small intestine right after your stomach. So it was right where your bile ducts go into your intestine and to excrete your bile waste. And so they would have had to like reroute all that. There's a lot of veins there and arteries and vessels and bleeding out, blah, blah, blah. That's basically what they told me. But I couldn't eat the whole time I was in the hospital. Had so many tests when I was in there trying to figure out stuff. And for some reason on the 7th day I was in there, it just went away. And then I got to go home the next day. But then a day later, had that same pain, went back to the ER, boom, same thing, another intussusception, the same place, same way. This time I go and they take it a lot more seriously. But that first night I was in there, my doctor is testing my reflexes. I guess just normal checkup, whatever. Like I'm new patient, I'm just gonna check his reflexes. And he noticed that I had something called hyperreflexia in my legs. And he was like, did you see that? Like when it's when they check your reflexes, the doctors, they hit you with that little Flintstones hammer, and then your knee kicks out of your arm or whatever, and my legs like shot up. I almost kicked him in the face, and he was like, did you see that? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't. And he was like, no, like that's not normal. So they sent me in to do a spinal MRI, and it was a 3-hour spinal MRI. I was in the MRI machine for 3 hours. They took me in at midnight. I got out of the MRI at like 3:30 in the morning. It was horrible. It was hot in there and I was anxious, but nothing really showed up on the MRI. They kind of saw the scoliosis, stuff like that. Nothing that would have caused that though. So very strange, but just keep that in mind. I then was in the hospital for another week. This time they were talking about more advanced surgeries and even transferring me to an even bigger city. Thankfully, don't know how, don't know why, but I'm thankful that again, on the 7th day of this second intussusception, it goes away on its own. They did a CAT scan and it was gone, and I felt like it was gone. And I don't know. It was just weird, guys. I don't even know. I'll probably do a whole episode on it, on my intussusception story and all the weird tests they did. But it was really around that time after that. I was really unwell after the intussusception stuff. That's kind of when my health started to decline, and that was kind of the start of this whole new journey for me. I knew it was going to be a long one, but at this point I couldn't run from it anymore. I was obviously being put in like life-threatening situations, so I had to follow through. So I started going to doctors. And the doctors in the hospital really encouraged me to start seeing doctors, and they set me up with specialists because they all were like, something bigger is going on. These are just not coincidences. These are all signs of a systemic problem. You have something very serious, and the hospital is not the place that we're going to figure that out. You need to go home, rest, get well, and start going to all these doctors to figure out what is going on. Because listen, nobody knew. They all could tell me like, they all were saying like the same thing, like something is very wrong, but we're not going to be the ones to help you. And that kind of seemed to be a common theme for the next 2 years. I was literally jumping around from specialist to specialist, doctor to doctor, traveling all across the state with just me and my mom, road tripping, kind of hitting that breaking point again where I was like, after a year, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting nowhere. I'm getting worse. At this point, the spasticity has spread to my legs completely. My left hand started to become affected. My left hand became really weak. My legs started getting weaker. It just became harder to walk. I was kind of walking like a pirate with like ankle weights on. And, like I noticed like little things in my speech, but like nothing crazy at that point, just like things that were just kind of off that I was noticing. And at this point, I kind of was saying like, okay, I'm going through all this stuff. I'm probably obviously very hyper aware. Medical anxiety is a thing. Health anxiety is a thing. It's real and I experienced it. I'm a lot better now thanks to my therapist. I've been in therapy for a year. Shout out my therapist. Therapy is hot. Go to therapy, guys. It works. But yeah, so was definitely going through a lot and just decided like, well, I kind of had a moment where I was like, I could stop going or I could see this through. And this is really when I kind of tested my strength. I could have stopped like before and just gone on with my life. But I think this time I knew it was different. I knew that I was getting worse. I needed to do something. My migraine, quote unquote, migraine episodes were getting worse. And I promise this all ties in together, guys. I know this is kind of a long episode, but we're almost there. So migraines are getting worse. I'm getting worse. I've started physical therapy and neurological rehab, and just nothing is really working. I'm not really getting my strength back. It's just I'm not getting better. So through all of this, somehow, I ended up at a geneticist's office in Arizona. A couple of specialists I saw and a couple of my physical therapists were like, have you had genetic testing done? And I said, no, but they're like, do neurological diseases run in your family? And I said, yeah, well, so on my mom's side, there is a known history of Huntington's disease, which is a terminal neurodegenerative disease. My great grandmother had it. Her four sons all had it. My grandmother, which was her daughter, she doesn't really have any symptoms, but doesn't want to get tested, which I respect. And once I kind of talked about that, they were like, oh, you need to get tested for Huntington's disease. This could be like definitely related to like Huntington's disease. This could be the start of it. And so this is when I go down the genetic testing route, and I could make a whole video on genetic testing. And again, guys, I'm so sorry if this is a long video. I know it's crazy. I have a hard time compartmentalizing this because it's so much and it's so all over the place. There's so many things happening at once, but we are almost to the end. But I go through like 4 months of Huntington's disease testing. Huntington's disease is a devastating disease. I didn't realize how devastating it was. I was adopted and raised by my paternal grandmother. So I was not around my biological mother's family. Had no idea really. I just kind of knew that it was there, but I had no idea what it was. So for about 4 months, I'm going to this Huntington's Disease Center of Excellence. I'm doing meetings with my doctor, with the doctor there, the Huntington specialist, meeting with social workers, genetic counselors, psychiatrists, all that stuff to get cleared to get tested and finally get tested for Huntington's disease. Came back negative. Thank God, thank the universe. Very happy for that, but glad to rule that out. But here we are back to square one. And so I ended up going to see this geneticist in Arizona. This man is a genius. I don't know what made him think to do all this, but he looked me up and down, sat with me for like 2 hours, told him all my symptoms, problems, timelines, gave him all my medical records, everything. And he was like, you've got a lot going on. So let's do something first called whole genome sequencing. It is the most broad genetic testing that you can get because it literally scans your entire human genome, which they didn't really recently map out completely until like, I think 10, 15 years ago, even. And this testing is relatively new. It's only like a 5 to 10-ish years old. I could be wrong. It could be a little bit more than that. I'm not too sure. I didn't do my research. But yeah, it was a big test. The only catch was it takes 6 months to get the results back. So I meet with him in Arizona and Phoenix, do the test, and then I go home and then I wait for 6 months. And this time I'm just doing physical therapy, twice, 3 times a week, stuff like that. I'm going back to therapy because I just need to get a handle on my mental health. 6 months later, test results come back. Found out I have a genetic skin disease, which we always just thought it was eczema, that I had dry skin, but my hands, for those of you watching on YouTube, my hands, I have a lot of lines and wrinkles on my hands, and my hands are really red. I call them my old man hands. Don't know if you guys can see. Sorry, everybody that's listening to this and not watching on YouTube. But yeah, I have a genetic skin disease called ichthyosis vulgaris. Ugly name, hate that. But nothing super crazy, just something to know. And again, nothing crazy. So he's like, this test is very broad, so it's possible it missed something, and I think it did. And I said, what makes you think that? He just said I just have a feeling. That's what he said. He said, I just have a feeling. So I said, okay, well, what do you want to do? And he says, I want to do one more genetic test. And so he did. And it was a custom panel genetic test. He handpicked 902 genes that were known to cause neurological diseases with symptoms that I had, and waited about a month for that. And that is when we had some answers and we're finally able to start connecting the dots. We found out that I have a really, really rare genetic mutation in my SLC1. Only about 400-ish people in the world have mutations in this gene, and that's just from people who have been tested. My specific mutation in this gene has not been documented before. However, my specific mutation in this gene has been documented in other genes. And so it was through this mutation in other genes that we were able to determine, because in those other genes with this mutation, they were found pathogenic and disease causing, that this mutation does disrupt the function of the gene. So that is how we know that it is causing problems, that my gene is defunct. It's not working right, which, guys, genetics is very crazy, very woo-woo. I still don't understand it, so I'm not going to try to be an expert on that. But this is when we started connecting the dots. Mutations in this gene are heavily associated with epilepsy, and there are some possible links to neurodegenerative diseases like ALS and even Alzheimer's disease. So I take this information and I go see a neurologist in the small town where I was living, tell him about this, and I tell him about my episodes of migraines. And he was like, I don't think you're having migraines. I think you're having seizures. And I was like, what? And he was like, have you ever had seizures before? And I was like, well, I had a brief history of seizures as a kid. And then I told him about that time when I was 6 on that horse. And he was like, that he was talking about the time when I was on the horse, and he said, that sounds like an absent seizure. Also, people with these kinds of mutations, seizures first start more severely in the first months of your life. So it's not a coincidence. This is probably all connected and tied together. So I'm thinking, oh my God, we figured it out. And so we start me on epilepsy medication, and it was a lot of trial and error on different types of medications and doses. But from the first time I started epilepsy medication, it worked. My seizures were less frequent and also less severe. So that's how we knew it was working. Also, there's a whole other side of this gene. I had what's called a de novo mutation. My parents were tested because they had to see who was the carrier. Neither of my parents carried the gene. So I have something called a de novo mutation. It is when you have a genetic disease, disorder, gene mutation, but you did not inherit it from either of your parents. It was not hereditarily passed down to you. It just happened with you. You were the first person with it. So let's say I were to have kids, which I do not want kids, but if I were to have kids, I have a 50% chance of passing this on to them, since this started with me, which is really crazy, and that's a whole other topic. But so yeah, epilepsy, figuring that out at this time, and I'm like, all right, we're just gonna roll with it. This gene also is known to cause like balance problems, coordination issues, also muscle problems. So I'm thinking that all of this is just because of the mutation, which it is, but I didn't realize the extent of what was going on in my body and what was happening. So basically, I kind of was just going through the epilepsy stuff and doing physical therapy, neurological rehab, not really knowing what was going on still, but it had the most answers I had ever had. And so as far as the intussusception stuff, also, they never really found a link as to why that happened. That could still happen to me again in the future. I hope it doesn't, universe, please. But they really never found out an answer to that. So just didn't want to leave you guys hanging. That just happened, which is crazy. I like to just say that my body likes to do weird stuff. Like it's doing party tricks, but there's nothing fun about it. Yeah, anyway, I ended up moving, and I wanted to live alone again. I had for those 2 years, I was trying to figure stuff out. I moved in with my parents, and it's starting to get harder to take care of myself, and so I moved in with them to make it easier on just me and everybody. I had to go to a lot of appointments, and it was hard to get to, so it was just easier for all of us. But I decided that I really wanted to maintain my independence, so I ended up moving. Well, during this time, I found a brand new PCP. She's amazing. She listened to everything I had to say, and I told her that I had epilepsy, and she wanted to set me up. Oh, I didn't even tell you guys what kind of seizures I have. I have focal onset aware seizures. They happen in one single part of your brain, and you're completely aware and conscious. There's a lot of different types of seizures. I had no idea. I really just thought there was like the seizures you see in the movies, like the convulsive, like grand mal, tonic-clonic ones, whatever. But anyway, forgot to disclose that. So yeah, I see this new PCP, and she's like, well, I definitely want to get you in with an epileptologist. And I was like, okay, great. And I was like, also, I'm having problems with my muscles and just wondering if there's anything I can do about that. And she was like, okay, well, this epileptologist I'm going to send you to is an adult neurologist. He also, does other neurology stuff, but he specializes in epilepsy. So I'm like, okay, great, cool. So wait 3 months for this appointment. I see this guy, and he's an amazing doctor. I love my doctor. He is just the sweetest, kindest person and just an amazing soul. And I meet with him, and he sat down with me for 2 hours, and we talked about everything. And he recorded everything on his phone so he can go back and listen to it later. Just a really cool guy. We decided to try new epilepsy medication that might have less side effects than the side effects that medication I was already on. I was experiencing lots of side effects like depression, anxiety, all that stuff that just was not fun. Really, really tired. We started new medication. We were talking about it. And then at the end, I was like, also, I'm having these muscle problems. Can you like help me out with that? And he's like, what do you mean? So I kind of tell him, I was like, well, started my left foot, and then like the spasticity got really bad in my legs. And it's now my left arm. I just feel really weak. And, don't really know what's going on. And so he's like, hold on. So he did like some reflex tests. And then he looked at my records, and then I told him that I had the genetic mutation with links to epilepsy and possibly ALS. And the mutation, or the gene, that mutations, that gene is so rare. The research out there is limited, but there is little research on it. His face completely changed, and he was like, "Okay, so change of plans. I think you're gonna have two neurologists." And I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "I want you to do a test called an EMG." And I'm going to send you to an ALS clinic to meet with a specialist there. If the EMG shows anything, and I was like, well, what's an EMG? And he told me it's basically just this test where they check to see how your like nerves and muscles are communicating with each other. And I was like, okay. Also forgot to add, I was having lots of muscle twitching at this time. Sorry, this is just a lot. I'm already all over the place. I was having lots of muscle twitching as well. At this point, it was really bad. I still have it all over now, but we'll know why in a second. So I go get this EMG. Wasn't that painful? Some people tell you it's painful because I think it is for some people. I think it really depends on who does it. My doctor was really good, but I met this doctor, and his tech. They were amazing. They're so great. Love this clinic. And they were supposed to do, I think, my full body, but after just doing the left side of my body, he stopped, and they kind of looked at each other. And I don't know if they know that I saw this, but they didn't like shake their heads, but they just kind of gave each other this look after he tested this one part. And then I looked back at my mom, who's in the corner, like clutching her pearls. She's like holding her purse, and I was like, what is going on? And she looked freaked out. But I mean, I would be too if I was sitting there watching like someone get like poked with needles in their muscles. And so the doctor, sorry. So the doctor is like, okay, you can get dressed. When are you supposed to come back? And I was like, well, I think I have an appointment in May. Keep in mind, this is early February. And he was like, no, that's too far. I want you to come back in like 4 days. And I was like, okay. He was like, we have an opening in 4 days. I want you to be here. And I was like, okay, well, I'll be here. So I'm getting scared. I'm like, oh my God, I have ALS. I have, like this is not good. And that next 4 days was kind of like a blur. I think I was just preparing myself to hear the results. I was just really hyping myself up just to like, hey, I'm gonna get through this. I had a lot of anxiety. I wasn't sleeping well. I was really going through it. I was kind of regretting a little bit following this through and just, to the end. But I knew I was really close to the end of getting answers. I worked really hard to get answers. I went through a lot of stuff. I suffered a lot of trauma, medical gaslighting, had horrible anxiety. I was really depressed. And I know that I didn't want that to all be for nothing. I knew that eventually it was going to make me stronger, and I was going to be able to see the strength inside of me that got me through those really dark couple of years. All of that was kind of coming to light in those next 4 days. It was just a lot of like revisiting memories, like how far I've come. It was just very existential and cathartic and surreal. Like I just couldn't believe like that this was my life. 4 days later, mom takes me back to the doctor, and as soon as he came in, he was just like, all right, well, here's the news and here's what we're gonna do. My EMG did show that I had like some motor neuron loss. It was chronic. So like over time, it wasn't acute, like recent. motor neuron injury, nerve injury, whatever, but that's why I was weak and getting weaker and I was having these problems. It did end up catching my muscle twitches, which are called fasciculations. It also said that when I activate my muscles, that the remaining motor nerves that I have left are trying to overcompensate for the ones that have already died. So it showed a lot of things like that. But there was one thing that it didn't show that was, I think, required to say like, hey, this is definitely ALS. But then so I was like, oh, really? And then, but then he hit me with but with your genetic mutation, your genetic makeup, the fact that all your other tests were negative, that you have a link to this disease and you have these symptoms that are progressively getting worse over time that I can see, that, this test can see and stuff like that. He was like, what do we do? You know, we have to do something. You're young. We cannot just do nothing. He said, do I think that this will turn into definite ALS? Most likely, yeah. He said, I believe that your future EMGs will show these changes. So, I want you to, start treatment for ALS. So I'm going to diagnose you with ALS so you can start treatment. He again was just reiterating, like, you're young, so we can't just not do nothing. And I think the younger you are, the earlier you kind of catch it in its early stages and start treatment, I think you kind of have like a better outcome, I guess, with the treatment. And let me be clear, in the United States, there are only, well, there's technically three treatments for ALS. One is for a genetic form of ALS, a familial ALS, people who have the SOD1 mutation. It's a medication called tofersen or Quelcity, and it has been proven to be really effective for people with this version of familial ALS. However, for people who have sporadic ALS, in my case, my geneticist was straight up, diagnosed with my genetic mutation, that there's no treatment, no cure for that. So yeah, I was kind of just stuck with the two treatments that we have here in the United States, which there's two medications. One is called Riluzole. The other one is called Radicava. So I started Riluzole, and then I also started Radicava. Both I did not have great reactions to. My liver did get really inflamed, which is a potential side effect. When that day he did tell me like, hey, this can cause liver failure, so, and my liver did start to go out of whack, so I had to stop that medication. The Radicava, I had an allergic reaction to. I got hives everywhere, so that just really sucked. Hated that, but that's just what happened. So now I just go to my ALS clinic every 3 months. I went to my first one in April, had a great experience. Everyone was really nice. And yeah, so I'm just gonna be monitored over time until and just so they can monitor my progression. And yeah, that's my story. That's where we're at. My genetic mutation and my SLC1A2 gene, the SLC1A2 gene codes for a transporter. So in our bodies, in our brains, central nervous system, we have these things called neurotransmitters, such as glutamate, GABA, stuff like that, things that make us feel and help with our bodily functions. So my mutation has to deal with glutamate, which in excess can be toxic to your neurons and can cause neuronal death. It's a process called glutamate excitotoxicity, and this is a known pathogenic cause of ALS. So that is where the connection of my genetic mutation and ALS go hand in hand, correlate. There's the relation. And that first appointment, my doctor mentioned, if you were going to get better, you would have gotten better by now. And that's really when it hit me, like, I am in for a ride. Man, has it been a ride? But you know what? I have amazing friends. I have amazing supporters. You guys, my besties, people who are watching this, who watched all the way through this hour and 15-minute video. I'm so sorry. Love you guys. But it's just, it's just one of those things where you cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. And everybody is different. I know I get on here and a lot of people say like, oh, Mikey, you're so strong. Your attitude is so great and positive. I don't know how you do it. I would be crashing out. And besties, I crash out all the time. I feel my feelings. I am in therapy, extensive therapy. I am traumatized. Every day is a struggle for me. But, even if you have to lie to yourself, I think that just trying, keyword trying, I think just trying to have a positive attitude, trying to see the positive in things, like rewiring how your brain thinks, makes a huge difference. When you're thinking negatively, like, what's the point? I'm going to die anyway, or Like it really affects your body. And I think mental health and physical health go hand in hand. I mean, absolutely. Diagnosis like mine definitely have had an effect and a huge toll on my mental health, my mental well-being. But I'm here. I made it through all of that. I'm still going through it. Thank God I'm not having to go to doctors like I was trying to figure out what the problem was. Did it take like 2, 3 years to get there? Yeah. But you know what? I didn't give up and I got the answers I needed and deserved. And I think that's, a huge message I want to convey to anybody watching who is going through the process of trying to find a diagnosis, trying to figure out what's wrong so you can get better and continue on with your life, or, even if you find out and you have to adapt to a new way of living like me, it's gonna be okay. But you are not alone and you deserve answers. Please don't give up on yourself. Please don't give up on trying to find answers. It's okay to take breaks. I get it. It is overwhelming, but just know that there are people that are going through the exact same thing that you were going through, maybe different types of diagnosis or health problems, but you are not alone. You are not alone. There are 8 billion people in this world, and I guarantee you that there is someone out there that gets it. That gets what you were going through. And I bet that person is also waiting to connect with someone like you. So I don't know, take a leap, reach out. If you want to share your story, I support it. If you're not ready to share your story, that's okay. But just know that there are communities out there that would still love to have you anyway, even if you're just a silent, member of a support group online or a local support group. If you're on social media and that's how you found me or my videos and my videos brought you some, solidarity, it's connection and love are, I try not to get emotional, but it's just so, it's hard. And it's hard, I know. It's hard. But you're strong, we're strong, and we will get through it. Absolutely. We will get through it and we'll see the other side. Just don't give up on yourself, please. You deserve all of the answers. Okay, you guys, that is it. Sorry for this long episode. I promise future episodes will not be this long. I just felt like I had to get this out of the way. It's one of the first episodes and it just I don't know, it made sense to do this. um, Thank you for listening. Thanks for being here. Going back to my Patreon. So I have a segment. It's just an extended version of this podcast. It's called The Leftovers, and it is only available on Patreon. So anybody, again, who wants to support this podcast by choosing a membership, this segment will be available to you. And it's kind of a more serious side. It's called The Leftovers for a reason. It's just kind of my hopeful message to you guys. It's about 10, 15 minutes of just extra footage, but it would mean a lot if you guys went over there and supported that. And there's so many more things that we're going to do on there, like just footage that no one else is going to see. But I'm super excited to share that with you. So if you guys want to go over there and check out the first episode of The Leftovers, I would greatly appreciate it. Today, I think on there, we're going to be talking about, kind of just not giving up, and perseverance, how far that goes in just your health journey and just in life in general. So yeah, if you want to go listen to that, I'd really appreciate it. All right, besties, that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I know this was a long video, but I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share my story more in depth. I'm sure I left so much out, but if you guys are curious about anything else, I have so many videos on TikTok, Instagram covering this topic of mine. So feel free to go check my stuff out there. Again, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, guys. And again, if you feel inclined, please join my Patreon, as it helps tremendously with supporting this show financially and analytic. So yeah, love you guys. Well, it was so good to see you. Thank you for coming over to my house, and I cannot wait to see you again. Please remember to be kind to yourselves and others. Love your neighbor, and I will see you when I see you. Bye, besties.